Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a review of The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. This is a book that has been on my radar for a few months now, I would say. A couple of people have mentioned it to me. Shout out to Evie, Dan and Matt in particular. Those are the ones that have really been kind of harping on about this book. So it's been on my radar for a while. Matt very kindly purchased it for me a couple of weeks back, and I was determined to read that book this year because there were so many things that I liked the sound of about this book. This is a debut book and it's kind of like a space opera, very character-centric, standalone book, and I didn't really know what to expect going into it, but I have to say it was an incredibly enjoyable experience. So let's jump into my review. What did I love about it? I think this is one of the most beautiful books ever written. It's very poetic, it's very lyrical, the prose is absolutely stunning, and it is mind-blowing to me that this was a debut. This author has a real way with words, and without a doubt, it's one of those books that I will remember until the day I die because it's just so beautifully written, so beautifully written. This author is incredibly talented, and I cannot wait to read the next book that he wrote after this, because I'm very curious to see how he has grown as an author, because honestly there's not much that he could have done to grow after reading this book because he's insanely talented. The character work was also exquisite. Everyone gets impacted by the events of this book. I'm only going to talk about a handful of characters because there's a really great secondary cast of characters in this book and they all feel really fleshed out, but for the sake of time we're just going to talk about a few. The first one is Nia. She is our main character, and she's one of these people where I don't know if she fully knows her place, and yet she's very smart, she's very capable. She's one of those very curious people and clearly very intelligent, but she doesn't really quite know what her purpose is. She's kind of just floating through time. She's kind of directionless, and yet that changes when she meets a certain character that I'm not going to mention because I don't want to spoil it. I did like her character because I think a lot of people could probably identify with her feeling and how she feels about what she's doing and about the things in her life. I think she's very relatable, and I think she's a really interesting character to follow for that reason. The next character that I'm going to talk about is the Nameless Boy. The Nameless Boy is probably my favourite character of the book because he's got this innocence and naivety to him that I just personally find really compelling. And I really like actually reading books from a character who is younger because the way they perceive the world is just different to how an adult perceives the world. And that's why I love being around children. And that's why children generally are very blunt, because they just say things how they are. Whereas as an adult, you are taught to filter what you say, right? Whereas children just don't do that. Our character, the Nameless Boy, he has this, because he doesn't speak for the majority of the book, and because he doesn't speak as well, so we recognize things in his facial expressions and the way he behaves around certain characters. And I just thought it was such an interesting way to execute this character because I've never really seen that happen before or done before. And I really loved it because we're not looking at what he's saying or listening to what he's saying. It's more about what he's doing with the people around him and the little cues that he displays when he's feeling happy or sad or whatever it may be. And I really like that. I thought it was really cool. The next character, and this is probably the final character that I'm going to mention, is Fumiko. So Fumiko is an insanely smart scientist, and she's kind of one of the people pulling the strings in this world. She's very, very smart, very curious, but she's also very lonely. I don't know if she necessarily always likes that loneliness. You never really know whether it's through choice or whether it's because of it's a symptom of the circumstances that she's found herself to be in. And I just found that to be really compelling. I wish we had had more time with Fumiko. We get her a little bit early on in the book. I think it's chapter 2, and then it's a while until we get her again. I wish we'd just had a book about Fumiko because I just found her so fascinating. And as I mentioned, there is a really great secondary cast of characters. I think every character feels fleshed out. Every character feels like it has depth, even if they're not even in the book for that much. Next, I'm going to talk about the kind of tone of this book. I think the tone of this book is very hard to describe. It's very beautiful, and that's not a tone. It's just very it feels like there's hope, and I don't know how else to describe it beyond that. I feel like people who've read this book will know what I'm getting at. but there's just something underlying this book that makes you feel hopeful, even though it doesn't necessarily always feel hopeful. Like I felt like it was all going to be okay for the characters and that good things were going to happen to them, even though that wasn't necessarily always the case. I just really love the fact that the author did that. I don't know if he did that intentionally. I'm assuming he did. But it's just a very like almost like whimsical read, and that's reflected in the tone, but not in a way that is done typically in fantasy. I just think it's, or sci-fi, like I think it's such a unique book. I really don't have a comparison point to it because it's really one of a kind, and that's so hard to do in fiction in general, never mind in fantasy. So super, super impressive achievement. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is the thematic work, and the unifying thread across this entire book is really about human connection and human relationships, timelessness of relationships, about how important relationships are to our humanity. This is something that I really care about, something I think about a lot, and I just love the way that he approached it in such a sensitive manner, and he did it in a way that felt very faithful to humanity, if that makes sense. It was just so beautiful to read. Like I kind of felt like I was dreaming when I read this book, just because it's just so, I don't know, it's just so philosophical, but like not in a dense academic way. It just makes you think about things that maybe you don't necessarily think about in your everyday. And I loved it. I really did. The only thing that stopped me from giving this book a 5 stars, and I'm still debating whether I'm not just going to go ahead and give it a 5 stars anyway, is the ending. Because I didn't really get the point of it. It felt very cyclical, which made sense, but I felt like I was missing something. And I don't know what it was that I was missing. I'm just curious to hear people's thoughts who have read the book. But I just felt like something was missing. I still don't know what it was. I will reread this book at some point. Something was missing. And I don't feel like the ending was completely satisfying because of that. And that was my only issue with the book. I gave the book a 4.5 stars. I really did love it. I think it's an exceptional book. Really one of a kind. And I think I'm probably going to end up giving it 5 stars anyway, because it deserves it. But I did feel like that last bit, I just didn't get it. Yeah, it's also possible that it just went over my head. I'm going to read a quote from this book because I want to give you a sense of the writing style. Then we'll finish off the video. But here's my quote that I picked. They haven't stopped at just stealing power, now buying up land from the government, expanding their acreage. Families evicted from the homes they've been living in for years. Some of my colleagues have resigned, say this is the history of our species and the best we can do is to win the tiny battles and hope for some sea change. The more I see, the more difficult it is to disagree with them. But a part of me still revolts against the notion that this is our basic nature, that we are, in essence, self-serving creatures, that love is an explainable construct and souls are a pretty feint to distract ourselves from our own cruel emptiness. And that's it. That's my very quick review of this book. I absolutely loved it. I will be reading his fantasy book because this was definitely more sci-fi, but his next book is very much fantasy. So I will be reading that probably in January of 2024. I'm very excited. And if you have read it, let me know down below. I'm especially curious to hear what you thought about the ending. And I will see you there. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody. Stay safe. And I'll see you soon. Bye.